Sydney, Australia. It's an iconic world city known for its grand harbour and famous beaches. But what's it like as a digital nomad destination? Well, over the last 3 months, I took advantage of the recently abolished border restrictions to spend some time in the big city and suss out the remote work lifestyle. This is Sydney for Digital Nomads.
So first off, I want to address why Sydney. As you're probably aware, Sydney is a big city, often rated as one of the most expensive in the world. As Australia's commerce capital, I'm sure a lot of people would move here based more so on career and business opportunities than just pure lifestyle. But for those of you who have been curious to experience Sydney, stay tuned as I share a little insight into the digital nomad lifestyle, starting right here as you arrive at Sydney Airport. To get to the CBD, there are basically two options, train or Uber. If you're traveling light, I'd recommend taking the air train into town, which is only $17 compared to spending about $50 on an Uber. For my 4-week trip in Sydney, I booked accommodation in the heart of the city, here on the corner of King and Sussex Street, which was a $50 30-minute Uber ride from the airport. I chose the CBD as a Sydney newbie so that I was close to restaurants, co-working spaces, bars and nightclubs. But for most Sydney-siders, living outside the city might be considered more desirable, especially if you live in one of the beachside eastern suburbs like Bondi or Coogee. These two locations are where two of my remote worker friends decided to stay, and they personally loved it. For my trip to Sydney, I booked this loft-style apartment inside Metro Apartments and spent 5,000 Australian dollars for a total of 28 nights. While not the most modern apartment, and with not the best internet, it was in a convenient location and was a comfortable place to stay for a few weeks. Full disclosure, I was actually able to take advantage of an offer from my friend Philip to stay longer in Sydney by renting one of his rooms here in the Greenland Centre for $550 a week without a lease. This apartment building was brand new and in an even better location, and the apartment was on the 79th floor, so take that into consideration.
Alright, so this was a bit of a unique opportunity for me, given that my friend Philip here was trying to fill a room, but I thought I'd throw it in the video anyway. If you are able to rent in Sydney, this is, I guess, is this typical of how much you would pay to live in the city?
I would say this is probably like more on the higher end. This apartment is like in the highest residential tower in Sydney. So this is probably at the higher end, and obviously like the rent is a bit higher up here compared to like the suburbs. And we are also like basically like in the heart of Sydney. Like you can't get any more like central than this. So yeah, for sure.
Alright, so now that you have a place to stay, let's talk about the most important thing you're going to need as a digital nomad in Sydney, a Wi-Fi enabled workspace. My initial plan was to simply work from home for the duration of my 4-week trip in Sydney, but given that I ended up staying for longer, I decided I needed to get out of the house and I started shopping for a co-working space. The brand with the best deal going at the time was WeWork. With WeWork's all-access monthly membership, I had access to all 10 WeWork locations in Sydney for just $215 a month, and I tried out absolutely all of them. If you've ever worked from a few WeWorks before, you would know that they offer a pretty consistent experience across all their spaces, with free coffee, fast Wi-Fi, printing, phone booths, and meeting rooms. Everything from reserving a co-working spot at the location to printing documents is done through the WeWork app or through the members platform online. It's a very efficient system, but with members spread across so many spaces, it definitely lacks the vibe of a boutique co-working space.
If networking and community is more your focus, then there are a ton of other brands in Sydney to choose from.
One of my favorites was the Hyde Park location of Hub, which seemed to have it all, including a podcast room, relaxation room, standing desks, and even a small gym. Hub, of course, is a national brand with spaces all over the country, just like Whatso, who have 5 locations spread out across Greater Sydney. If you're into the startup scene, there's a spot in the CBD known as the Startup Hub, which hosts 4 different co-working spaces, all focused on the startup community. I visited 2 out of the 4 spaces, Tankstream Labs and Fishburners, where I checked out a Friday night pitch event. If co-working isn't your thing, you can always perch up at a cafe or library, but unfortunately there aren't many notable options, at least in the CBD. This place, for instance, was cool, but no Wi-Fi. I can imagine that there are even less options in the suburb, but I mean, if you don't mind working from home, that's always an option. You just never know for sure about the Wi-Fi when booking accommodation.
As mentioned at the start of the video, this may not be the most enticing location for travelers in Sydney, but at least you've got access to the expansive public transportation system like trams, buses, ferries, not to mention Uber, so it's very easy to get around the city.
Alright, so now that we've covered the essentials for working remotely in Sydney, let's talk about the fun stuff. First of all, a little disclaimer. As you should know, Sydney is not a cheap city, so don't expect to have fun without a little spending. I remember the last time I went to Sydney in 2015, I couldn't enjoy myself because everything felt so expensive. 7 years later, I'm lucky enough to afford a good life in Sydney, but it's not the kind of place I feel like I can go wild in either. What's great about Sydney though is the diversity, both the diversity of the people and the locations. You can really find a little bit of everything in Sydney, including some stuff you won't find anywhere else.
What'd you get?
Let's have a look. All right, so I got a chicken barbie and they gave me a free iced coffee for no reason, just because they're nice.
Is it because they saw the camera?
Probably.
Flight test.
Have a look at that. I've been meaning to order something else here, but this one just tastes so good. I've been set on this. Check it out if you're in Sydney. Alright, so let's talk about the different areas of Sydney. I got my map here. Let's open this bad boy up. Alright, so we're here in the CBD, but as I mentioned, the eastern suburbs is the most desirable area. You've of course got the famous Bondi Beach. You've got Coogee, which is a smaller alternative. Up here is where all the basically rich people live. You've got the most expensive houses in Sydney up here in Vaucluse. Most expensive suburb is right here, but you don't really need to live in those areas. If you want to stay near the beach, Bondi Beach or Coogee is a good option. The weather in Sydney has been unusually horrid for the last few weeks, and today is a stunning day, so I decided to come down to Coogee. I get why people like to stay in the eastern suburbs now. I mean, look at this. Hey, how's it going, bro? The Coogee native himself, or
That's
local.
me. I'm becoming a local. I'm trying to become a local. I'm getting there.
So this is Denver, this is my mate in Coogee. He's been talking it up. So what is it you like about living in...
Look at it. Show them the view. Show them that view. Look at the beach. So I love the coastal vibes. The weather is actually good today, which is a nice change. But yeah, I just love the environment. It's always busy. There's people around everywhere. The atmosphere is what makes it special. And I think waking up and smelling the ocean, seeing the ocean from where I live, and then just coming down, I just got back in the gym. And I'm gonna go do some work right here, go home, just walk around. Everything's walking distance. Like, I love that mostly about it.
It's definitely got better vibes, I'd say, than the CBD. Obviously, it's a concrete jungle. But the flip side is that, there's no PowerPoints here. The Wi-Fi is pretty trash, honestly.
The Wi-Fi's not the best here.
But at least we got the vibes.
We have the vibes. Coffee's not bad. Coffee's not too bad.
Yeah, the food and coffee's not bad here too.
Catch you later, man.
All right, back to the map here. Obviously, Sydney has a ton of different areas, but the ones I recommend living in are Coogee or Bondi for the beach life, or if beach living isn't important to you, the CBD, which for my American viewers is what we refer to as downtown in Australia. Also worth a visit while you're here is Surrey Hills, which is where to go for some of the best dining in Sydney, the eclectic queer-friendly area of Newtown, and Pyrmont, where you can visit the casino and check out the views of the city.
For those OG viewers of Chris the Freelancer, you know I love traveling to destinations where it's easy to meet other digital nomads. But unfortunately, at least in my experience, there is literally no digital nomad community here to speak of.
Often digital nomad destinations have a Facebook group, but not Sydney. There is an Australian Slack channel on Nomad list with over 6,000 members, but there hasn't been much activity since I first joined. It's become quite clear to me that being a digital nomad in Sydney is a bit of a rarity, especially given that our international borders have been closed to tourists for almost 2 years. And although I should hope that the fallout from the COVID-19 pandemic should fade away shortly, there are still restrictions in place, especially regarding masks, which have been mandated on public transport and other indoor spaces. It's obviously an awkward time for travel, and Australia is yet to recover from the trauma of COVID restrictions, but with the border now open to international tourists, now is your opportunity to visit and see this beautiful city for yourself. Alright, so in order to make sure that I was covering everything that you guys wanted to know about Sydney in this video, I put it out to the community on YouTube and Instagram, and by far the most requested topic was cost of living. Now, cost of living is a tricky subject because cost of living is highly variable depending on what kind of lifestyle you're living. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through my expenses, cover my own personal cost of living, and I'm going to do it two ways. I'm going to do the first 28 days when I was staying in the Airbnb, and that will kind of be my digital nomad cost of living. And then I'll go through my March spending when I was staying in the spare room of Phillips, and that will show you more of a, I guess, normal renting cost of living. So, jumping into the computer here, I've got my first 28-day Nomad cost of living. As we saw above, I spent $5,000 on the accommodation, which is not as much as I usually spend. That was definitely a step up, but I knew I had to do that to get the good location in Sydney. As you can see here on the final column here, I've converted all the numbers to US dollars at the current rate of $1.36 Australian dollars to US dollars. All right, so this is going to make it easier for all of you US viewers and people that think in US dollars. So accommodation was by far the biggest expense. I spent $429 on food and drink. That doesn't include groceries and dining. So dining is stuff I consider like going to a restaurant and having an experience that's dining, not just for the food. Do you know what I mean? So that is down here. I have broken up drinking and partying into two categories. Parties kind of covers event entry fees, whereas drinking covers any alcohol I buy at these events or any alcohol I buy for house parties and stuff. Obviously got coffee in there. Phone and internet is easy, just a phone plan of $40 per month that I spent. And for gym, this is not really something I talked about in the video up until now, but I was able to get a month membership to Snap Fitness for just $80. I didn't even have to pay for the key card. And that gave me 24-hour access to Snap Fitness, which was just walking distance from where I was staying for just $80. So that was a total coming out to $7,265.35 Australian dollars, which is roughly $5,242 US dollars. All right, now I'll switch over to my March cost of living, which looks quite different. The accommodation cost is like halved now because I was renting rather than staying in an Airbnb. I've included my Coworking membership there of $215. What's most notable here and kind of embarrassing is that I spent $1,455 on alcohol. I promise you that was not all for me. Sometimes I get a little generous when I go to the bar and buy a few rounds. So this one is a bit out of the ordinary for me. And then same thing with parties and events. I went to a gala event for Miss Multiverse, which was like half of this cost. But otherwise that just covers nightclub entry fees. I did a bit more dining in the month of March. And this gym expense here covered like trials. I was basically just trialing different gyms for the month of March. I kind of knew I was leaving at the end, so I didn't really sign up properly to any one gym. And so as you can see here, the cost of living comes out slightly less than the Nomad cost of living, but as you can see, my drinking expense was way higher. So if we were to let's just eliminate that. And if we cut out drinking, we can get the cost of living down to $5,000 Australian or around $3,745 United States dollar.
Alright guys, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a big old thumbs up, leave your comments below. And now that the international border is open, should be making a lot more content this year. So make sure that you're subscribed to this channel, and I'll see you on the next video.